Welcome everyone to Gotham City Central. Typically these will be streamed live, but because this is our first video and I did not think about it, we do not have access to live streaming yet, which is unfortunate. But I am joined here by Torgo and Robert Wilde. And we're here to talk Batman. I don't know about you, Robert, but Torgo and I's favorite superhero. Is that true for you as well, or does he kind of fall maybe a little bit down the list? Okay. So all of our favorite superhero. Interesting.
When I was a kid, technically Robin was my favorite superhero. So
he's not a superhero. He's not a superhero. He's a sidekick.
Batman. Okay, I see how it is.
He becomes a superhero when he becomes Nightwing.
I'll give you that.
For our first video on the channel, there's no better place to start than The Dark Knight Returns. In many ways, as I personally am not a fan of the 60s style of Batman, this is kind of what creates the Batman that I like. And I would say it's not a hot take to say this changed the course of the character forever.
I think that's half true.
Oh, wait. We have a half true. Okay.
Well, it should be noted that this Batman going back to his more noir, serious roots, that goes back to like the late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
You can give Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams a lot of credit for that. Now, this is definitely by far like the most adult comic Batman thing published at the time, for sure. But in the previous decade, like, we were getting into a more serious place. I mean, you know, if you consider the animated series, like the definitive Batman, like most of what that's pulling from is the Danny O'Neill, Neil Adams era. Like, they created Ra's al Ghul and brought a lot of classic villains back and all that stuff. What a big thing that this thing did was, at least as far as American comics go, there aren't a lot of like big, what you would call graphic novels I can think of before this. And of course, this wasn't published all as one. This was published as a 4-issue miniseries. But still, it was this one concise thing that you could just give to people and say, this is great, read it. Oh, you don't like comics? Well, read this. You know, right. This is kind of starts that era of Watchmen and all these other big things coming out where it's like, oh, this isn't decades of history. It's just one little story. And I think a big thing that this specifically is responsible for, at least to a degree, is getting like Warner Brothers more interested in making their Batman movie. However you feel about Tim Burton's Batman, you can definitely cite this as kind of getting us there, where it's like, oh, this was a popular thing that did well. Yeah, exactly. Whereas before, a Batman movie was just kind of in development hell. Maybe it would have happened, maybe it would have taken longer, but this definitely kind of boosted that interest on that. So it's an important comic for sure.
And sorry, I hit my mic. They still would have made like a campy Batman movie too, because I think at one point Bill Murray was supposed to be Batman. So this comic saved us from the Bill Murray Batman movie.
And I can definitely see what you're saying there, Robert. What I would say that I mean more so is this is the book that broke into the mainstream. And this is what almost everything has been looking at for 40 years. Like, I don't want to take away from O'Neill's work because I've heard it's very good. I still need to read that stuff. But I would argue that this is more so responsible than anything else in the terms of mainstream media. This is what everyone is looking at.
And there's also a lot of stuff.
Has there ever been a better cover for a book? Like, this is just
an iconic cover.
It's great.
It's so good.
I do really like this cover. I think this was published in late 80s. My uncle gave me this, and it is a beautiful hardcover that is that in Year One and Another Story.
I think that works for more. I think that works for what it is because that's just like a Frank Miller collection. Whereas if you're looking at like The Dark Knight Returns, this is the picture. I know that it had a different cover. Probably had a few covers. But like the main original cover, I'm not a big fan of. Is it in this book? It's not.
The one I know is the one of just like the silhouette of Batman's face.
Yeah, where it's like the top half of his face. Here it is. This one. Oh,
yeah. That's from a later reprint that is taken from a panel in the story. But yeah, that's a much later reprint.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this as the cover.
Mm,
I
me
don't think
neither.
it gives you I don't think it gives you anything about the story other than who's in it. And this keeps falling out. But this is I think a perfect representation of this book's atmosphere, its mood, and how it treats the central protagonist.
Well, and I believe that's the cover for issue 1 when they started coming out. Because
It is. Yeah.
minor trivia, at least as far as I know, this wasn't called Dark Knight Returns. It was just referred to as Dark Knight. I think the first one or two printings collecting it all, it was just called Dark Knight. But now we have a movie called The Dark Knight, so we all call it the Dark Knight Returns. I don't think it starts there, but for a while we've just been calling it Dark Knight Returns. But when this was
Mhm.
released in 4 chapters, issue 1 was The Dark Knight Returns, and then issue 2 was The Dark Knight Triumphant, followed by Hunt the Dark Knight, and then the last one was The Dark Knight Falls. So each issue had its own specific title, and everyone just kind of referred to the whole thing as just Dark Knight. And now we all just call the story Dark Knight Returns because it's more specific.
Yeah, so when it was originally published, it was called Batman: The Dark Knight with a subtitle for each issue, and that
Yeah.
these collected editions do keep those subtitles.
Yes,
I don't know
mine
if
does.
yours. Okay, yours does too. And also
It doesn't
some
have the
beautiful
covers, though.
artwork. Hold on. So while I'm looking for something in this book, go ahead and tell us about the first time that you guys read
Sure.
this.
Yeah. Well, I actually first heard about this when I was like first getting into Batman when I was like around 12 or something like that. I think the first part of the animated movie was coming out, and I was like, what is this weird story where Batman is an old man and there's like it's like the Cold War is going on and there's all this crazy shit happening in the background, like and I don't remember if it was the first Batman comic I ever read. It was either that or Killing Joke. It was a lot for me, like as like a younger teenager first reading this, because it was like a lot of it admittedly went over my head. But I was so like fascinated with just the vibe of it, just the artwork and the overall story, even if there were like certain things, like a lot of the satire obviously went over my head because it's like steeped in the 80s and like the Cold War era. Um, but no, I mean, I just remember being absolutely fascinated by it. Um, and I still am today, although, and we'll get into it as we talk about it. As much as I love this story, I don't think it's my favorite Batman story. Um, there's it's not really my definitive Batman, but we can talk about that later.
Okay, Robert, real quick before you, I want to swing back to what we were talking about while I was letting you guys talk about your experience with. Mine does. This is the original cover for issue
Issue 2, I
2.
think.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
that's interesting that yours doesn't because mine has all of the original covers where they're at.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, mine just has like the titles.
Some of
At
them
the
are
start of
pretty
each
cool.
chapter.
Some of them are not great. Like this is kind of a generic. God damn it!
It's kind of
This is
lame.
kind of a generic lame cover. I like this like black and white picture of Batman though.
I really
But
like the
anyway,
one with. I really like the one with Superman just because he has a sword and that looks awesome. That's not actually in the comic, but it's a cool cover. It's a great.
That's one of my
wait,
favorite
which one?
covers.
The last
for
one.
the last issue,
Okay,
the one where he's fighting Superman.
Robert, go ahead and you tell us about your first experience with this comic.
Yeah, my first exposure, it was just kind of a mix of random things. Like, this has been homaged and referenced in so many things outside of like the actual animated 2-part movie. Of course, there's an episode of the New Batman Adventures that adapts a segment with Batman fighting the mutant later. I don't remember seeing that as a kid, but I do remember seeing the segment with like the more Dick Sprang, like classic Silver Age throwback for people who are familiar with that episode. So I don't remember like if I just like missed part of that episode or if I didn't have a reaction to it. So that's the first one. And then there was an episode of The Batman from 2004 that jumps to the future, and that has the tank. It has like a big, heavy, bulky Batman. And as a kid, like that was weird for me because my
Yeah.
only exposure to like an older Batman was Batman Beyond, which of course borrows some stuff from this, but that is mostly its own thing, with just some nods and references and just kind of ideas and themes. But that Batman was my first exposure to like that visual for an older Batman. I was like, this is weird, this is jarring. And around that time, my uncle had gotten. There you go. That's it. My
For
uncle, I
reference
guess.
for anyone, this is the cover he's talking about. I agree. I love this the way it's colored.
Mhm. And I think I guess when I was a kid, my uncle got like the trade of it and like let me flip through it, and he was telling me about some of the stuff that happened in it. It was just like this very weird, like just getting like cliff notes and random things. I was like, "What is this?" But I don't think I was allowed to read it yet. I was too young. I grew up like reading a lot of different Batman comics. Like I had a collection of the greatest Batman stories ever told. I think that came out in the '90s, and I got the first volume of Chronicles, which had like the first several issues of the Golden Age stuff. So like I read as a kid, like the first appearance of Batman, Robin, the Joker, all that stuff. So it wasn't like you until the animated movie was coming out that I really got like interested. I was like, okay, what actually is this? And I finally read it start to
Mhm.
finish, and thought it was great. Like it's probably a top 5 Batman story for me, at least top 10. I can't call it my favorite. I have a hard time coming up with like what is my favorite Batman comic because they are so different, even more so than movies and shows. Like the comic books as a medium, you just get so much variety and weird different takes where it's like there's just a lot of Batman comics that I love. It's like it's really hard for me to pick a favorite, but it definitely ranks really high for me. I do really like it. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
was like a young teenager when like I finally sat down and read the whole thing start to finish and really liked it.
Okay. I don't actually remember the first time I read this, but I do know it took me a couple of reads to get into it. Um,
Interesting. I remember on
my
first reading, it took a minute to adjust. Like there's some stuff that happens where you kind of have to read between the lines, and they don't give you a lot of information all the time, and you just kind of have to piece stuff together. So it can be a challenging read for
so
sure.
the thing with this that I had when I read it for the first time is I still very much had a black and white look at superheroes in comics, and this isn't a superhero book. This is
Right.
this is just a Batman book with political overtones or political, message discussion. So I kind of struggled. It doesn't fit in that black and white of like this is what a superhero book is. And I
Hmm.
was still newer to the medium of comics in general. Um, this may change as we go through the channel and review more comics and I read more Batman. But as of right now, I would say this is my favorite Batman book, especially when you get into the later half and it kind of boils down to the Batman and Superman fight and their difference in ideologies. I
Yeah.
really like this Batman's ideology.
Yeah, the interesting thing with this comic is we always look at it as very like futuristic, like RoboCop or something, which of course Frank Miller would go on to work on. So there's a lot of like parallels with that, you know. But it's more like Watchmen, where it's actually like an alternate 1980s. Uh, you're not really supposed to think about it. They don't give you exact years, but I mean, they reference things like World War II and Vietnam, and of course, Reagan is the president in this. So, like, it's clearly set in the 80s, but it doesn't lean as hard into the like alternate history route that Watchmen does. It's a little bit more
Yeah.
vague about it, but then occasionally you do get like those really overt references where it's like, oh yeah, this isn't really the future. This is like just an alternate version of the time it was written and came out.
So one
Right.
thing I wanted to bring up before we get too much further into the discussion of the book, does it annoy you how many things have looked at this and gotten the wrong idea?
Yes and
Um,
no.
yeah, for the most part, it
So the
does.
main thing that I always think of with people that get the wrong idea from this book is everyone has to do what if your popular hero was old? Uh we have Spider-Man did it, Power Rangers did it for some reason, Buffy did it. This isn't a good book just because he's old.
Right.
Like him being old is just part of the story. And it has
Right.
something to say with that other than isn't it sad that your favorite hero is old and like beaten up? He's he's still like a monster in this book.
Yeah.
Like
And I mean, I don't think the book is really that focused on him being old. It's just kind of part of the story. It's
It
like
is up until that first mutant leader fight.
yeah, I mean, there's obviously, stuff in his internal monologue about him being like too old to like fight a lot of the stuff that's happening in the book, and like he does come close to dying many times in the story. So it kind of just adds tension to a lot of the action scenes, but like I don't know, like I feel like this it's more just about Batman in general than it is about what if Batman got old, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
Like
and
there's some talk in the first half, he can't do this, and like this is harder than it used to be. And like
Yeah.
I have to do it this way now because I can't do it the way I did 20 years ago. But that all disappears, I would say, about halfway through the book. Once you get past
Right.
that first mutant leader fight, and we have that scene in the Batcave where he's like, I know you're not finished with me, which is another thing that I love about this book, is he kind of treats Batman like a supernatural persona that he can't get away
Yeah.
from. I think that's such
That
a
stuff is really
fascinating
cool.
take, and we never do that anymore.
yeah, it's definitely present in animated series, but not much outside of that. Just like getting into his psyche. But yeah, he's also not like super old in this, relatively speaking. They specify he's 55, which is old, but it's more about like, and he didn't retire because he got old. He retired like because Jason died.
And he
Jason
Well,
caused the
was
second
it
Robin,
seems
he
or
was
that's at least
forced
a
to.
reason. And
Yeah.
yes, there are
yeah,
other things as
it's a
well
little more
that they hint
complicated
at.
than that. Which, how amazing is it that this book has Jason die, what, like 2 years before Death in the Family? Or is it Death? Yeah, it's Death in
Yes.
the Family.
And
Fuck you,
yeah.
Scott Snyder.
Gotta Scott Snyder.
Hey, I like Death of the Family.
It's
Um,
okay.
so how do you guys feel about kind of the lack of a Bat family in this? He doesn't
Um
really have a relationship with Dick Grayson anymore. They never mention Barbara Gordon, which is weird with how
Yeah,
much Gordon is in the book.
Barbara like basically doesn't exist, and I mean, if I had my wish, I wish Dick showed up at the end in the epilogue, but I mean, it's not part
Well,
of the story. Like, it's
with
fine, but
what
he
we
is
got in the
referenced.
second book, I'm also wish he just showed up in this
uh,
one.
Yeah,
as far as the Bat family goes, I do like more that it's more focused on just Batman. More so like Batman as a character, but also Batman as a symbol. And I think it would kind of distract if we had like Dick Grayson showing and Batgirl showing up. I mean, as far as like Carrie Kelly, like she's a pretty good Robin. Um, she's not an especially interesting character, but I do like her. But I mean, overall, I'm more. I'd like that it's more focused on Batman as a character.
I kind of disagree about Carrie Kelly, but we'll come back to that. Robert, what were you saying about Dick Grayson?
no, that was basically it. If it were up to me, he'd appear in the epilogue or something. We'd go more into that, but that's fine. We also don't even know how Jason died. I think Frank Miller eventually told that story, and it's very weird.
And
But that's
yeah, that
conversation
was
for
like
another
a
time.
20-year later prequel.
Yeah, it's
Because
just filling in those gaps. Because the interest, there's like 3 points I want to hit right now, and I'm trying to like pick which avenue to take. This comes out the same year as Crisis on Infinite Earths, where we get rid of the multiverse and just simplify everything to one Earth, and that's like the goal. And we also get this, which is like sort of the first Elseworld story. It's really weird. And then there was this period of DC where it's like, no, it's all one Earth, it's just one canon. But oh, here's these other Elseworlds things until we finally just said screw it and brought the multiverse back. So that's weird. But this and Watchmen, both were like, oh, this can be a thing now, just these standalone isolated stories. But there was still, I guess it just depends on the writer or artist you talk to. I think in the fan you talk to, but I know for some people, like, there are people who like consider this canon, or at least considered this canon back in the 80s. Like,
Yeah.
no, this is the future. We're gonna get there. And then
I
we kind of were with Jason dying a couple years later. So if they wanted to, like, there was a good period of time where like this could have been the official future if you wanted it to be.
so
I do not see this as the official future for Batman.
I don't either. It's a
Yeah.
completely standalone story.
I think I just want to clarify, like, I still love this story, but I think it should be an Elseworlds. Like, it's a separate thing.
Especially since
So-
it's so cemented in the 80s.
I'm
Right.
of two minds. I think I lean more towards keeping this as an Elseworld story. That's why it really annoys me that there's now 3 of these.
Yep.
Even though 3 wasn't terrible, like there was parts of it that I liked, but I could see this being, and you would have to kind of update some of the stuff, which that could be dicey. But certain status quos, I think this could be a future of the DC universe.
Mhm.
But with comics being kind of like on a sliding time scale, that's a future that you could revisit multiple times and tell in a different way. Like, there's never going to be a canonical ending to the DC universe. Same way as there will
Right.
never be a canonical
Right.
ending to the Marvel universe.
Right.
That's what's fun
yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and that's one thing I wanted to talk about earlier was just that this starts that trope of seeing your hero older and in a dark place and they kind of have to refine themselves. Like, I actually like that trope a lot. It makes some people are really averse to certain characters getting older because they're like, no, it ruins the fantasy. I just want them to be perpetually this. Like, that's why we recast James Bond over and over again. And for James Bond, like for those movies, I think that's fine. Like, I'm fine having some characters like that. And of course, Batman will be rebooted and revisited over and over again long after we're dead. Like, that's fine. I accept that. But when done well, and it's not always done well, but I get something out of seeing a character be older and in a different place and letting them all. It makes them more real to me. Like, I think what really got me into that trope was Rocky Balboa, the 6th Rocky movie with Stallone. Like, there are good examples of letting, in that case, an actor age with a character, and it just makes them more real and more impactful, in my opinion. And this wasn't even, like I said, about Batman like getting old and retiring. It's like, no, Jason died and he was forced to, and there's stuff with the government. And like one of the inspirations they were looking at, I think, was like one of the Dirty Harry movies, which is just about him coming out of retirement to do another job or mission or whatever. So there's other things this is looking at, but just the idea of having a Batman story where he's over 50, like, yeah, that was a new concept at the time. It was something really cool.
So I agree. I also like that trope, but the problem is that we don't stop and think if it fits the character.
Right.
It works for Batman because it is very important that Batman gets old, because it is very important that he remains human. And slight spoilers for Dark Knight 3. I don't know if you guys have read it.
I know what you're about.
Don't care.
They ruin it.
Yep.
They put him in a Lazarus pit so he becomes young again.
Oh,
And that's how that book ends. It's so dumb. I hate it.
that's,
but no,
that's silly.
But the problem is when we have characters doing it, like when we're doing it with characters like Spider-Man. Yeah, Spider-Man can get old. He should not be 80 years old and miserable.
That
Spider-Man
doesn't
Reigns
sound fun.
sucks because that's not Spider-Man.
Exactly.
It works for Logan because if Logan were to ever get old, it would be shocking. Or in the case of the Logan movie, there's a story there. And that's a send off to an actor that we've grown to love in the role. It works. Nobody cares about Tommy when he's in his 50s. Like, I'm sorry, I love Tommy as a character, but I don't need a Tommy story when he's like 50 and as a kid. You know, it's just case by case.
Yeah.
Buffy works because it is a coming of age story. There is no coming of age story when you're 50.
I mean,
anyway, that's my
it's
soapbox
not-
for the day.
It's not
Well,
necessarily a trope that I dislike. It's like you guys said, it just has to be done well.
Well, and I guess I should retract the previous statement, because I guess my first experience to this really would have been Batman Beyond. You know, I watched that when I was a little
yeah.
kid, and that was my first real exposure to seeing, like, and that is about his age, and like that you get an 80-year-old Bruce Wayne who at the start of that story is alone and miserable, and that's more of the passing of the torch story with this new character becomes the new Batman, and it's really cool and it really works. And you know, Batman Beyond and Dark Knight Returns are doing two very different things, and like I said, Bruce Wayne isn't even like in the same age range, but you can definitely see like the elements they were taking from that.
But
for
again,
Batman
that
Beyond.
works because Batman needs to get old and become unable to do it. He needs to keep that human element, and that's something that
he's
this
mortal.
book. And it's funny because for all the people that are taking from this, they somehow missed that when it's spelled out in the book by Clark getting old, or not, sorry, backwards, by Bruce getting old, but Clark never does. Clark stays the same, and it's a
Yep.
problem.
Yep.
Not a problem with the book, I mean, mind you, but a problem within the narrative of this book is that it is a problem because Clark is the government stooge. But
Yes.
we're getting ahead of ourselves. Anyway,
can we circle back to Carrie Kelly, because we kind of
got off on a tangent.
Yes, sorry, I got on my soapbox. So Torgo, I disagree that she's not interesting. I find her relationship with Bruce very interesting. That he almost immediately becomes a surrogate father, and while he is strict and maybe sometimes too much, take a shot every time he says he's going to fire her. But I find it interesting. He's almost a better father to Carrie in this than he's depicted in most adaptations as to being a father to Dick or Damian or any of the other Robins.
Interesting. I mean, I guess so.
Not in every adaptation, mind you. There is adaptations and stories where he is a great father, but he comes to care for this girl like really quickly. And I find it interesting that her parents are basically like burned out hippies from the 60s.
Yeah.
And she takes in with a billionaire vigilante, and we never hear about her parents again.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of implied they don't care enough about her.
Yeah, there's like one
see what
scene
she's doing.
There's like one scene with them near the end where one of them's like, "Don't we have a kid?" Like,
Yeah.
where is she? Yeah. It's what I like about Carrie. She's kind of a proto Tim Drake, where she's a fan of Batman or someone who's inspired by Batman, and then joins the fight like on her own. She's not brought in by him. And I mean, for the vast majority of Batman's history, like him and Dick Grayson get along, they're old chums. It's not until I don't think you get to the 70s and 80s where they start exploring more of the nuances of that relationship and like the complicated aspects. And of course, Frank Miller would later go on to write All-Star Batman and Robin Boy Wonder as a prequel, which retroactively changes how you see him in this book. And like, so he will retroactively make Bruce like the worst father figure ever who tortured that child. And in my opinion, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
He can say that is in the same continuity as this all he wants. I've seen enough of that book. These are two completely different Batman characters.
Yep. Especially as a sequel to Year One, where it's like you can see how this and Year One line up if that's how you want to look at them. All-Star Batman is just this weird other thing that he says is canon with this stuff.
I mean, I haven't read All-Star Batman. I've seen enough of it to like it doesn't really line up with what's in this story or Year One, whereas Year One and Dark Knight are pretty consistent.
And just one final note on Carrie Kelly. I do like her a lot. She's pretty much the first female Robin, though there's this random Golden Age story where like an old love interest that Bruce Wayne had, Julie Madison. There's like one story where she wears the Robin costume. So that's just like a visual, like that's a thing. And then more famously in the pilot for Batman 66, Riddler is the villain in that, and he has a henchwoman named Molly, and Molly dresses up like Robin as part of the scheme and impersonates him. But when she doesn't have the mask or wig, she has red hair. So I'm not saying that's where they got the visual or design for it, but if not, it's a weird coincidence because that's like what your only real example of seeing a woman in the Robin suit, and she has red hair. It's like that kind of looks like Carrie Kelly, which was not Frank Miller's idea. He was on a plane trip with John Byrne, who's most famous for X-Men and Superman, and he was the one who said like, "Ooh, like you're doing a future older Batman thing. Make Robin a girl," and he like drew the sketch, and Frank Miller really liked the idea and immediately went with it. Like, so that's all I know about that. Like, I don't know if John Byrne watched the show and that was just a visual in his head. It could be a weird coincidence, but yeah, Carrie Kelly, like more or less is like our first real female Robin, and she's kind of one of my favorites. Like, I do like her. And then Stephanie Brown's a character in the '90s, like she was Robin for a minute. But
Mhm.
other than that, we haven't had a lot of female Robins, and Carrie Kelly is a
You
standout.
say a
So
lot, but you named the only two.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think I
there's only
misspoke.
two.
I probably misspoke. There's also like an Elseworlds thing where Bruce Wayne's daughter was Robin, like that Helena Wayne before she became Huntress or whatever. Like that's a thing. So there's like other Elseworlds examples. But
Mhm.
yeah, like so, do you right, Kaylee, and the thing is with you guys earlier talking about or Noah talking about how like or Torgo that oh this like is just about Batman, like there's not a lot of Bat family stuff. Like I have to disagree because Carrie is in this a lot, and I always find it really strange when people always talk about how oh I like Batman when he's a loner. I don't like Robin. I don't like the Bat family. I just like Batman when he's a loner, which for the vast majority of his history, Batman has always had a sidekick or partner in some
Yeah,
capacity. And this is always a story people cite as a favorite and also say, oh, I like Batman when he's a loner. And it's like, I just find that strange when Robin's a really big part
that
of the
is weird.
story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for
Yeah,
sure.
I
I
don't know.
mean, I
Maybe
just
it's just
think
because
the
of the
more,
movies.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think what I was saying earlier though is I think the more interesting like character stuff in this story is done with Batman as opposed to Carrie Kelly who's there and like she's very charming. She's a very good Robin. It's just that like I think the meat is more with what this story has to say about Batman.
No, I would agree, but I would say that they're even using Kelly for that. Do you guys remember in the
Okay.
New 52 when they tried to bring Carrie into the main continuity?
Yep. And then she disappeared.
Yeah. Although they reference her again, and I guess in the Rebirth, they do like a one shot future where Batman and Catwoman have grown old together, and Carrie is a member of the Bat family.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm legitimately surprised we've never tried to actually do a successful push to bring her into the mainstream continuity. I'd like to see another female Robin. The two that we have, I like.
I think at this point, I mean, Damien's been Robin for a while, and I actually do like Damien, at least in some stuff, but I'm kind of ready. I'd be fine with a new female Robin, but like that's a new character. Like I feel weird about Carrie being in main continuity. We did try with New 52, like that did happen for a minute, and then she just disappeared, and other than like one rebirth reference, never seen again. But I think I'm just so attached to her in this book specifically. Like I feel weird about putting her like
Yeah.
in the main stuff. I'm too tied to it with like, well, no, she's Robin when he's 55, and unless the main canon like got us there, I'd feel weird about integrating her. But that's just my opinion.
No, that's
And if
fair. And it
they
doesn't have to necessarily be Carrie, but I think that'd be
yeah,
interesting because we also haven't had the traditional Batman and Robin dynamic in comics in how long?
very
Sure.
long like since the 2000s or
I feel
something
like
like that.
Damien is more on his own now than anything. Like he's still
Yeah, the
Robin, but he kind of just does his own stuff.
early New 52 had some Batman and Robin stuff that like Grant Morrison's run kind of carried over like through the reboot into New 52
Oh
with
yeah.
Batman and Robin. But I mean that was like 10 years ago or over 10 years ago now.
Don't remind me. Okay. Anyway, so we immediately start this book with the idea that Batman is an adrenaline junkie looking for a good death, and
Yes.
that's kind of a reoccurring motive with this. Is he brings it up multiple times? This would be a good death. This would be a good death. This would be a stupid
Yeah.
death. Do you
Yeah.
guys think this Batman has a death wish?
Yes. In the opening, absolutely.
But do you
In
think
the
he has it
in the
throughout the
first
whole
scene,
book?
I don't know if he has it after that.
Because he's
'Cause when
clearly thinking about it.
yeah, I think it recontextualized in the first scene. You know, he's like because it's in the beginning where he's kind of depressed and he's lost his way because he's not allowed to be Batman anymore. So he's like searching for that adrenaline again, for that feeling. And he feels like, yeah,
Restore the feeling.
if I die right here, you know, no problem. But after he becomes Batman, I think he's more thinking like along the terms of like this will be a good death as like for a hero, like I'm actually dying for something here.
Okay. Um, so before we get further into this first issue, how do you guys feel about the art?
I love it.
I love
The
it.
the art is by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson, with the colors by Lynn Varley, and it's so unique and gritty. Like, it's just such a radical departure from Batman art before this. I love it. Some of it can definitely be take a minute to adjust to, and there's a lot of text and a lot of just small snippets of things. Like, the first page is a perfect example where all you're really getting is close-ups of his face, like when he's doing this
Yeah.
race and he's driving this car. Like, you don't get like wide shots for context. Like, you really got to read and pay attention to like figure out what's going on a lot of the time. But I think the art's gorgeous. It's very detailed, but also very simplistic when it doesn't need to be super detailed. Like, I love the look of this book.
So I have mixed feelings on the art. Some things I really like just to give an example, I love these 2 pages where it's just him like walking through the city, and you really get a feel for like how this Gotham looks. But then you get some pages like this that it just kind of becomes white noise. I think they're going for more of a black and white look, like right here, and it's
Hmm.
not bad, but I would have liked a little more color here.
I can see that. I like how much white there is in the book, just because there are some pages where like the color do get really pops. Like, a good example is like the first time Carrie suits up as Robin. Like, it's just looking at herself in the mirror, Robin suit with like just on a white
This
background, and it's just this really gorgeous shot. And like that's very
this
iconic.
might be the best shot of the blue cape suit I've ever seen.
I
Yeah,
love it.
good.
I am famously not a blue cape purist. I prefer a black cape with a black logo, like he wears in the later half of the book. I would love to see this in a movie. I think this you could pull
Yeah.
off.
I mean, Neil Adams and Todd McFarlane are definitely ranked
Oh
pretty
yeah.
high for me as far as like the blue suit goes, and that art. But it looks great, and it's cool that you get both. Like, you get the blue suit with the yellow logo, and then in the back half you get like just the all black
All
and
black. Yeah.
gray. Like, that's kind of neat that you get multiple bat suits in this one story.
And I
So
want to
before,
say this
oh,
is
go
one
ahead.
of the first stories to have the black and gray suit, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an early one.
At
Like,
least to my knowledge.
Yeah,
it.
this is just beautiful. I love this
Mhm.
page. So before we go any further, just to spin off on the art discussion, how do you guys feel about the bat logo in this? Because I know
I think it's
when the
cool.
And this, I think it's fine.
when BVS was announced and they showed us the first look and it was basically the Miller symbol. I feel like all I heard for months was how the ears were too short and the logo was too fat.
I thought it was weird because I'm like, it's from the comic.
Yeah, it's like, have you people not read The Dark Knight Returns? That's still the best
Clearly, a
Batman
lot
live
in it.
action suit. Don't at me.
It is.
Um,
It is. I mean, it's not my favorite. Like, my ideal live action Batman suit would be like a happy medium between the Ben Affleck one and like how he looks in Arkham Asylum, the video game, with like
Hmm.
longer ears and a thinner logo. It's there's like a happy medium between those two that I would picture, in my opinion, as like my definitive live action bat suit. But in that movie, it does look great, and it's the suit evolved a lot over the years. Or like the yellow logo, like that didn't even come to the 60s. Like, it was always all black before that, but there was that blue there. So in terms of just black and gray, like, I think that starts here. And just with how big the logo is, it's for his chest because he's such a big brawler in this, and it looks cool. And the
yeah,
one thing that BBS doesn't take from this that does bug me is the bat signal is not that logo. The bat signal is from the first suit, the blue and yellow one, where it's a lot more round. And in this story, which I can't believe we haven't done this in any movies, the bat signal doesn't shoot into the sky because that doesn't make any sense. If there's no clouds, you can't see it. It's projected on the building,
Yeah.
on like one of the tallest buildings in Gotham, so everyone can see it. It's like, oh, that makes sense. And it's weird that we've never done that in a movie. So that we can talk more about BVS, about like the stuff that Snyder gets right and the stuff he doesn't get get right at all, and the stuff he takes from and the stuff he ignores. But that's one of them where clearly Snyder likes the black and gray suit and does not care about the blue one. To
Yeah,
the point
so
that the black and gray logo is what he uses for the bat signal, which is not how it looks in the story.
we'll save a lot of that for when we eventually do either the commentary or the review. But one thing I do want to mention is I agree with you, even though I don't mind it in the context of that movie. But
Sure.
I think that is a case where we really needed that solo Affleck movie before you got to BVS, because it really plays like that's the logo, because that's the only suit he's ever wore before this. I would have loved to see. Can you imagine if we'd gotten a solo Affleck movie where he's wearing the blue suit?
That could have been awesome.
That could have been cool.
Well, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't find the right visual. Like, imagine if Affleck got to wear this.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
before Robin dying, like that was the golden age of his Batman.
Yeah. Um.
And since we're talking about the suit, when he has the yellow logo, they also, what I really love about this comic, and this will get back to that, is that it treats all the silly sci-fi stuff from Batman like, yeah, that stuff still happened, like that's still in here. It's not like the super grounded, like realistic world. Like Superman's still there. There's still some weird sci-fi technology. There's not a lot of supernatural stuff per se, but it's still this heightened stylized world. Like it's gritty
Yeah.
and mature and serious, but it's not quote unquote realistic either. But he still plays with those ideas where he can. And one of them is with the suit, with the yellow one. Batman literally says to the audience in his inner monologue, like, this is why I put a target on my chest. Because when criminals are shooting at him, that's what they hit. And he has protection under it, some armor, so it doesn't kill him. But he's like, I want them shooting here, not at my head, because if they hit my head, that's when I'm gonna die. So it's
Yeah.
just this cool little logical explanation for why does he have a big logo on his chest. And I
Remember
like
when
that. I
Arkham
think it's fun.
Knight? Remember when Arkham Knight made a big deal out of that? And yet his like
Uh,
whole suit is armor in that.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point?
But
I
no, to your
forgot about
case, Miller actually makes like a big deal out of it too, because you
that.
see he's missing
there's
the
the
Batson
Kevlar.
logo.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a cool little detail. Especially, this is a relatively low tech Batman, at least out in the field.
Yeah.
Like he's using regular just rope with hooks. He's got that rifle that's like a grappling gun. This isn't a high tech like Nolan Batman that's using a bunch of gadgets and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think
Which
that's what I kind of
really
like
like.
about it.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm not a big fan of like super high tech Batman, to be honest. Like I like him having gadgets, but I think it goes too far in like certain adaptations having like the Batwing be like a flying saucer or something like that.
I think the Arkham games is kind of the perfect representation of a high tech Batman, where it's really he just
Yeah.
has high tech like detective shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and for the mechanics of that game, it's fine. Though one could say, oh, that's a Batman that relies too much on technology to do his detecting. But what I like about his gadgets in this, it's like when he's fighting like mutant gang members, it's just he's just got the grappling hooks and the batarangs, which he uses like shuriken as this like there are so many panels of batarangs just going into dudes' arms and hands, and it's very bloody
Yeah.
and brutal.
And the Joker's
Um,
eye.
And
Yeah,
the pain but don't forget his most important gadget, painkillers.
that's true. But he also has like acid and different
Yeah.
things. But then when he's confronting like the whole mutant gang, like the whole army, like that's when we pull out the back tank. We use the back tank when we need it. He doesn't have that the whole story. It's just for that one
Yeah.
chapter. And then Carrie uses it later. And then when he fights Superman, that's when you get some of the more high tech stuff, like the sonic gun and that, which is a really cool moment where he's like, I'm using like the city's power to power this and like mess up Superman during that fight. Of course, we'll get to that more in detail, but
So,
the technology used like appropriately when he needs.
yeah, so and we'll get back to that. So do you guys like or dislike how few villains we get in this?
I
like
think we
it.
get just enough.
You
I
think
think
you
we
okay?
get the right amount. Yeah. It's focused. I think if we had like the whole rogues gallery in here, it would just be unfocused and just like a jumbled mess. I like that we mainly just focus on Joker and Two-Face, and I guess you could say Superman's like an antagonist in this.
So let me ask you
Um,
this really quick because I'm not very familiar with the mainstream Batman status quo at the time. Are these the two big villains? Obviously, Joker is like the big villain, but is Two Face in that same tier at this time?
Yes.
Today, I'm not
Mm-mm.
sure.
No, he means in
When
the
this was
80s.
published.
Oh, in the 80s. Probably. I'm not sure.
I'd say top 10. I mean, he wasn't like in the cultural zeitgeist yet, just because like he wasn't in the cartoons, he wasn't in the Adam West show. So like you had to be a comic reader to like know who Two Face was. But he is one of those villains like in the late 60s, early 70s that like had been gone for a while and brought back. Like what we think of like as the modern quintessential rogues gallery, like Joker, Scarecrow, Riddler, Two Face, like they were gone for a while during the 60s and brought back like through Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams and Roy Thomas. Like a lot of those villains like had been gone for a bit, and then when they came back it was like a big deal and they were used again.
Mm.
Hugo Strange, another one. So I don't know if I'd call Two-Face like a top 5 villain at this time, but he's like at least a top 10. Of course we get a cameo from Selena Kyle later. I think the big ones that this isn't using are like Riddler and Penguin, who aren't like
Right.
referenced at all. But in the context of the story, I don't think it needs them. I think we use just a, and we
Yeah.
tell an interesting story with Harvey Dent. Like when I was a kid and my uncle was describing this to me, that was just one of the things he mentioned was, oh, Two Faces in it, but he has his face fixed, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
That's a story we revisit with Two Face a lot, so it's kind of a quintessential Two Face
Yes.
story. Also, probably
And
an
yet he's
influence from
still a
Hush
bit
with the
player.
band. Yeah, he's
No,
still a bit
Oh, yeah.
player, but the story
this
you get is
has to be like the main inspiration for
For
Hush.
Hush. Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
By the way,
definitely.
Two-Face is just like a brilliant choice to use as a villain for like the overall themes of what the story is telling,
no,
Yeah,
it's
for
so
sure.
good.
especially in the first issue, which is about, Batman coming back and him not being able to repress the Batman side of himself, and Harvey not being able to repress the evil Two-Face side of himself.
Yeah, and Selena, what he does with Selena Kyle is very different from what we had done with Catwoman in the comics at the time. But then Frank Miller will retroactively, and in my opinion, more successfully, write Batman Year One, and that depiction of Selena Kyle. It's like, oh, I can see how that version of that character ends up where she is in this story as a prequel to this. So
Mhm.
that's a prequel that I think fits in well with this. If you're going to consider it canon, not the other stuff he did later.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. No,
And
I agree with you. I think it is a brilliant parallel. And probably one of the best uses of Two Face that I've seen. Um,
mm,
in
Hmm.
in my Batman reading or watching. I'm trying to find a good picture of Hush, but he doesn't really draw him in frame.
Yeah, it's mostly in like smaller close-up panels
Yeah.
yeah,
when he's
because
like on the TV.
Yeah. So
well,
okay, you're not gonna be able to see this very well, but right here where my finger is, that
Yeah.
right here, that is Hush. That is Two Face in this. And if Jeff Loeb is saying that he wasn't inspired by this, he's a fucking liar.
Jeff Loeb.
because that where Two Face is at the start of the story is he's supposedly cured because Harvey Dent he's
Mhm.
had surgery, he's been in Arkham for a while. They think he's cured and he looks normal, and then he goes back to his old ways as a criminal and he starts wearing these bandages. So which makes you think like, oh, he's probably messed up his entire face or he's rescarred his face. And then when you get that amazing reveal when Batman rips the bandages off, like no, he's still fine. But then we see how he sees himself, which is just all disfigured, all awful. And Batman has
Mhm.
pity for him. He says he sees a reflection in him. Like that,
Mhm.
Batman and Harvey weren't like friends. Like that wasn't really a thing yet, I don't think, in the comics. But like is this constant pull of, man, like I want these villains to be reformed. Like people who don't read comics who like to just joke about Batman will always say like, "Oh, why does he just punch people and not try to help them?" It's like you're only saying that because you don't read Batman comics. Two
Right.
Face is one of the examples who he is always rooting for and wants him to
Yeah.
get better, but he just always backslides.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I hate those people. And Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has Lex Luthor
Yeah.
writing the codex entries for the characters. He's one of those kind of people.
Oh no.
They write him as one of those kind of
That's
people.
that's a funny opinion coming from Lex Luthor, who's like a corrupt billionaire.
Well, this is a Lex Luthor that also is really thirsty for Wonder Woman, so
Oh,
Oh
weird.
no.
Okay.
I'll tell you guys later.
Oh.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so we get Two Face for is it the first two issues like an even clean half?
It's just the first one.
Yeah.
Is it just the first one? Okay. And then we kind of move into the Joker, and it's kind of a slow build up. How do you guys
Yeah,
feel about
issue-
this Joker?
Oh, I think he's great.
He's horrifying.
Yeah, issue 1 is Two Face. Issue 2 is the mutants or the mutant leaders specifically. Issue 3 is Joker. Issue 4 is Superman. That's like the simple way.
Oh,
but there's
okay.
obviously
I'm
overlap.
sorry. So let's rewind then, because I wanted to tackle this villain by villain. I love the mutants. They shiv.
They're great.
They
Slice and
shiv.
dice.
Torgo, do you shiv? Has
I
Rick
don't
Miller ever
shiv.
put out like a dictionary for what the hell they're saying? Because I still don't have any idea.
That's like I kind of have mixed feelings on the mutants for that reason, because a lot of the time when I'm reading them, I'm like, what the hell are they even saying?
It was
That's
really
makes it great.
bold.
Yeah.
It was really bold of them to make an entire gang of Cyclopses.
Yeah.
I'm
they're
sorry, all I
called
can
the
see is
mutants.
this. All I can see is the Cyclops visor. Like that's got to be intentional, right?
I wonder if it is an intentional X-Men reference.
The
Also,
mutants,
why are they called the mutants?
because they like disfigure themselves. It's like just
Oh,
that body modification thing. I mean, the leader, like they literally say, like he's like chiseled his teeth and made them
Robert.
right.
Robert.
Yeah.
It's because they shiv. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, yeah, but I forgot. Yeah, the leader like sharpens his teeth.
Yeah, it's like,
Crazy.
ugh.
So
I don't. Now you were talking about Carrie Kelly earlier. Like I don't think we've tried much to bring the mutants into main continuity. Like
We
they've been
haven't.
referenced in several things, but like that's something you think we'd do at some point. Where it's like, oh, we're out of ideas. Let's have the mutants start to rise in Gotham. Like they're
So-
pretty unique to the story as far as I know.
So one thing that was interesting is I actually haven't read this in a long time, but I've watched the animated movie a lot. So like my memories of this book got mixed up with them. And I forgot that there isn't actually like a subplot where he goes to visit the general like there is in the animated movie. All you get is this panel and it's horrifying.
No, that's right. Yeah, I had
It's
that
a
same
gorgeous
reaction too. Like I forgot that in the book it's really just that one page.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the movie more in detail when we get to it in another video, but it does a really good job, in my opinion, as an adaptation because there's a lot of stuff in the comic that'll happen, and then text will then give you context and tell you what just happened.
Yeah.
That's for example where we just open to this page of Batman just holding this corpse draped in the American flag with a gun, and we're like, what the hell? And then over the next couple issues, like we're given the context of, oh, this is what happened. But the movie's like, yeah, we can't do that without just constantly having exposition and narration. So let's show the scene. And
Right.
it really works. There's also these little tiny moments that no one talks about in this comic where, like, for one page, it's like, hey, here's this person in Gotham. Here's their story. And this is what happened to them. Or
Mhm.
here's this guy and why he went off the rails because Led Zeppelin was giving him satanic. Like he was told that Led Zeppelin was giving him satanic and like made him go nuts because he was raised in a super like conservative household or whatever. And this guy was
Yeah.
No,
like,
I love
like, oh, I'm
that.
doing this.
You get a lot
And-
of that in the last issue where you're just focusing on random people.
The one that breaks my heart every time, where I'm like, oh right, I always forget about it every time I read it, is you just get this one page about this poor woman in Gotham. It's in the first or second chapter where this woman is just like on the subway and she's poor, but in her
Oh
purse, like she
yeah,
has this paint kit she got for her son, and then she's assaulted by a couple of mutant gang members, and they push her out the train door, and she's like relieved. And then you realize, like, oh, they just dropped a grenade in her purse, and then
right.
she blows up and she's dead. And it's just like
It is really
so
sad.
many. There are so many moments like that that don't come off gratuitous. It's just telling you the stakes and like, yeah, like these criminals aren't the comic is constantly hammering home like, yeah, these aren't fun costume supervillains who are trying to just get money or steal a thing. It's like, no, these are evil, messed up, psychopathic gang members, and it's really violent and dark and sad. And
So
that's why Batman comes out of retirement. Like he just can't take it. There's just too much crime, and it's just building up and getting worse.
so let me
He
ask
can't
you
take it
this: if they're so bad, is it weird that he basically takes them under his wing at the end?
I see. I was gonna get to that when we. That was something that always kind of bothered me. It's like, wouldn't this Batman like want to see them in prison? Like,
I think it works for this take on Batman, like this morally gray version. And I really like his speech near the end where he's like, "We don't use guns,
yeah,
like follow me." Because the whole point is after he defeats the mutant gang member, like they haven't really learned anything. They're just like, oh, now we're into Batman. So now we don't do crime, we fight crime. And by fighting crime, we mean chopping people's hands
killing
off.
criminals. Yeah,
Yeah, they're still psychopaths, but now
yeah,
they're like, oh, now Batman's our branding. So when he riles them up, it's like, okay, now no, this is how we do things. And the ending is a bit squeaky clean, where you just kind of have to roll with, like, oh, I guess they're just gonna follow him and do whatever he
yeah.
says, and that is consistent with this version. Instead of just locking them up in prison, it's like, no, you are my army and this is how we're going to do things. Let's go. And maybe it's a bit squeaky clean because, like, realistically, if you properly continue this, it's like, yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of this is going to go wrong in a lot of ways, probably. But in the context of the story, it doesn't really bother
Well,
That's
good
kind of
thing
one
they
of the
never
things.
made a sequel.
Oh god, that's kind of one of the things I have with this book is I kind of have to keep reminding myself that this is like a darker and slightly more villainous version of Batman.
Yeah.
Um, I know some people have called him like a fascist. I don't know if I go that far, but like you can kind of see that a little bit in how he operates in this book. Um, I don't know.
So
That's kind of why I want to see this more as like an Elseworld story than like
Sure.
my Batman. But I do, I still think it's very well written and it's a great story.
So to give you an olive branch of sorts, because I do think this is pretty close to my Batman. It's inconsistent, right? Because like in the first two issues, he is very staunch. Like, no, all crime is bad. Two-Face has to be stopped. The mutants have to be stopped. And then in issue 3, he's going way further than he did in the first two issues.
Yeah.
So let's get into issue 3, and then we'll circle back around to the mutant fight at the at the end of 2, because I kind of have a theory and I want to run it through by you guys to see if you think it works. But I want to talk about issue 3 first. Is the Joker and Batman fight at the end of issue 3 going too far with Batman?
I don't think so.
I think for the story, if we are to read this as a more villainous version of Batman, I'm fine with it. I know there's the theory of like, does Batman actually snap Joker's neck, and he's not just like imagining himself watching the Joker snap his own neck.
No, he clearly
I
does
don't
snap
buy
his
that.
neck. But no,
Yeah.
okay.
There's
So
nothing else in the comic to suggest that.
So let me ask you this, and this isn't me stating any opinions that I have towards this book for anyone watching. This is just me throwing out ideas to see where we fall. So this Batman is pretty dead set on killing Joker after he wipes out a room of entertainment, of a night show, right? 200 some people. This is also the same Batman that didn't try to kill Harvey Dent for blowing up like 2 city blocks.
Yeah.
His relationship with Harvey and the Joker's very different, though. Like he
But we don't
knew
know
what.
his relationship with the Joker in this.
Well, we're aware of
It's talked about though. Like
it.
he
Joker has killed more people than Harvey has.
yeah, and there's that line about, Batman's like, there's all the people I've murdered by letting you live. Like, like he is considering killing the Joker in this.
But I don't know if I don't. This, I guess this is where my opinion part will come in. I don't know if I buy that this Batman would be thinking about it. I don't know if this Batman would get as far as he does.
I think it works because of just the passage of time. Like this isn't an early Batman Joker fight. Like this is the last one. And this is the comic that I think really cements like the Batman and Joker being his arch nemesis. Like he's one of the main villains in the comics before this. But this does something a lot deeper and creepier with their relationship that will stick, that we see in the Killing Joke and like every Joker story after this. He is much more of a sadistic psychopath in this, and Batman just reaches his breaking point where he's like, I haven't had enough. And it hits like obviously Harvey almost kills like hundreds or thousands of people, but he doesn't because Batman stops him. So you can still have like that pity there. And even though we don't know what their relationship was, right, like he still knew Harvey Dent. We can infer that. Like he knew the man Harvey Dent was pre Two-Face, which is why he's rooting for him. Joker, he doesn't. Whatever you consider canon, it's like Batman didn't know who the Joker was. And what the Joker does is just this extra level of just sadistic twistedness. Like it's as awful as it is to like have Harvey Dent who's like gonna blow up a building or whatever. There's something that just hits so much more viscerally with Joker feeding poison cotton candy and killing like a couple dozen children that way in the amusement park. And before that, poisoning everyone on that stage. And just shooting random people in front of Batman eyes. There's just something so much more vicious and visceral and in Batman's face. There's that great scene just talking about Carrie, like looking in her eyes, like the innocence being gone now that she's seen this level of violence. Like I can understand if you think like maybe the comic doesn't get there, maybe the comic doesn't earn it because we don't get enough of Batman and Joker stuff leading up to it or stuff for context, but I still think it works because what the Joker is doing, I think I buy Batman beginning as a breaking point, and he still doesn't kill him. He still stops himself for like he's now crippled this man for life, but he gets extremely close,
very close, but
he doesn't do it.
But I
And
also
then
don't know if I even buy
you.
this Batman maiming someone. Like even before that, you get the batarang to the eye.
I buy this Batman. I mean, he cripples a guy in the first issue.
No, because he says he'll walk again.
Well, there's that other guy who falls. No, well, and after I think it's that guy who, after he's crippled, he then falls through a window of glass and has glass.
Clearly takes him to a hospital.
He does, but like that man is bleeding to death in front of him.
Okay, but there's a difference between using that is to intimidate someone, fully knowing that you are capable and will save their life, and putting a batarang through someone's eye.
He threw batarangs in people's arms and hands.
Okay, but that's not through someone's eye.
I'm with Noah. I think it's consistent.
It's apples and oranges.
Really violent Batman.
See, I don't know. I think there is it is a violent Batman. I'm not disputing that, and I like that for the most part. But I think there's a change between issues 2 and 3, and I think it's the mutant fight. Because this is what I wanted to ask you guys. Frank Miller treats Batman as this mythical being that's inside Bruce's mind. And we have that scene where he's like, you're not done with me yet. You're never done with me. And it feels like there's a shift there. Do you think that it's supposed to be a shift in Batman's psyche? And that's why he gets so much more violent with the Joker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Batman takes over Bruce's body, basically, in this story. They're two separate personalities. At least that's how I read it. And
It
you know,
there's definitely hints at that, like in that first issue when he has like that nightmare. I think it's about like his parents getting killed, and when he gets out, he's in the cave and he goes out and sees Alfred. Alfred says, "Oh, when did you shave? Like when did you shave
yeah,
your mustache?" And he doesn't even
he
remember
does.
doing it.
He
That's
doesn't
one of those
remember
little
shaving.
moments that's like, oh, we're kind of going with the split personality
Yeah.
angle with Bruce and Batman, which is really
Oh,
interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to ask you guys this. Is it too absurd that Alfred is still alive?
No. Remembering that Bruce is only 55, it's fine. Because I'm going to assume Alfred's like 8.
Well, and I assume he could be an Alfred that's not that old, like the Andy Serkis and the Batman.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, that was a much younger Batman, too. But
true.
it's important to remember that at this point in time in the comics, Alfred didn't raise Bruce. That comes way later. Like, Alfred is a character
That comes with year
introduced,
one.
like, in the 40s. Yeah, probably which granted, it's supposed to be a
which
prequel to this,
canon to the story.
fair enough.
Yeah.
So fair enough. That's might be considered a canon issue, but generally speaking, in the comics before this, like Alfred just shows up and then just becomes the butler and just works for him, and then just slowly over time, we just kind of keep saying like, "Oh, no, Alfred's been there a while." You know, he's the Wayne family butler. You know, that comes over time. That doesn't go back to the start. So here, like, if you're looking at it through that lens, it's like, nah, it totally works. He's like maybe 25 to 30 years older than Bruce. So, and then eventually at the end of the comic, he has a stroke and dies, which is
Right.
very sad, and they don't mourn it enough, in my opinion. But yeah, so that works fine for me.
Hold on.
Because remember, Bruce is only 55.
I feel how sad it is, even if the book doesn't really. Yeah, no, but I buy, because it's clear that Alfred is very old and close to death, and he eventually does die at the end. So
yeah, it's almost comical. Like he dies with the house.
Right. I mean, it is kind of, but it doesn't play comical. Like it is kind of somber.
It is very somber. It will never be not be funny to me. Like he blows up the house and that kills him. I'm trying to find a picture of Alfred from year one, but it just keeps giving me Earth one. It's like that's not what I want.
There's not a lot of.
I mean, he's not a big part in that story.
Alfred doesn't get like a one panel thing.
Also, talking about the art, as much as I love in the art, like if you want to be critical of the art, like we're really inconsistent with like how old or young people look. It just kind of, it's all those comics are just kind of varies from page to page. Like Reagan's just one example who isn't really consistent with how he's portrayed, just visually. And Bruce like doesn't always look exactly the same, you know. So it's just one of those details that you just kind of have to roll with.
No, yeah,
so
for sure. Like
I couldn't say like from any one panel how old Alfred's supposed to be, but I would guess like mid-80s.
I don't know, because typically, and I admittedly some of this is hindsight, right? But typically Alfred is much older when Bruce is already in his 20s or 30s. It's 20 years later. Alfred would have to be like 90.
At this point in the comics, he doesn't have to be.
Yeah, well, that's why I said admittedly with some of that is hindsight.
Like I said, it's something Frank Miller probably didn't think about when he was making year one.
No, absolutely not. So criticism aside, I do love the Joker issue. I think it's a little bit better in the movie, funnily enough.
I think so too. I think that's really strong.
Because I think the movie also cuts the cotton candy stuff. It's just like a long chase sequence.
That's the one thing cut that I wish wasn't, because there are some things over the course of the comic that are kind of where they have some of the edges shaved off or censored just a little bit.
This is a fantastic panel.
Yeah, that one's great. But the one bit that's cut that I'm like, ooh, I wish that wasn't cut, was the stuff with the kids, just because it's so violent and messed up. And it's like, no, we need to see
that
Joker
scene
being
still
more evil.
That scene is still very violent.
The Hall of Mirrors part?
Oh yeah, that part is.
The whole amusement park stuff, because in this, he goes further and says that he's poisoned the cotton candy and it's like killing children. Whereas
Yeah,
in
you
the
see the
movie,
body.
it's just like a killing spree through the. So I think
I
it
mean,
remains that roughness. It tightens
yeah,
it up a little bit.
it's still pretty rough in the movie. Like you, I think honestly, I think part 2 of that movie probably should have been rated R. Like it gets pretty
Yeah,
graphic.
How is that not rated R, but the killing joke is?
Yes,
it's absurd.
doesn't make any sense.
That that was
yeah.
just at a time where the censors just didn't care, and you could just get away with it. Like, oh, that's a Batman thing. It's PG-13,
Yeah. Oh,
and it was
put it in like the kids section at Walmart.
yeah.
So, Torgo, did your version? Is this the version that you read the 30th anniversary?
I read it on DC Universe, which was just the issues.
Okay.
So it was like, yeah, it wasn't like in a collection or anything.
Robert, does your version have a foreword by Frank Miller and Brian Azzarello?
Mine does not. Mine has a foreword by Alan Moore, which was written like I think just like a year after Dark Knight Returns came out, and it's very interesting. It's very good.
Oh, interesting. So I kind of skimmed through the forward. I'm going to be honest. I don't typically read them. I'm here for the story. That's, but something I found interesting is he talks about the big beatdown in issue 2. We're going to rewind a little bit to kind of Batman's only defeat in this.
Mm-hmm.
Actual defeat. I don't count the Superman thing. We'll get into it. He didn't lose that fight.
Well, and with the mutant leader, it's more of a draw because he still gets arrested and it's still messed up. So,
but he talks about his inspiration for that was Rocky, funnily enough, where Superman is the guy that can take a punch better than he can throw a punch, and it's really just about like the endurance, being able to go the distance and endure that fight. And I thought that was an interesting way to go about it, because yeah, he gets the shit beat out of him.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Yeah.
No, the leader does still end up in prison, which is weird, right? Like
he has to be lured out of prison.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have just had Batman lose clean. If you're gonna do that, like it works the way it is. Just find it weird.
But I also like that he kind of gets the drop on him at the beginning of the second fight.
Yeah.
So it's so that's like that's a little bit like cooler than if he just had to go back to the base.
And
well,
oh, go ahead.
Well, in the rematch, like that's the one little segment that was adapted in animation, that episode of New Batman Adventures. It's very fun and very cool. And Frank Miller, I guess, was like super thrilled with it and like thought it was awesome because it was like the first time his work was like adapted in something. Michael Ironside voices old Batman in that, the voice of Darkseid, and he's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah,
worth rewatching. It's just that one segment, but it's really cool. And there's the great scene in that second fight where he says, "You don't get it. This isn't a mud hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon." And he snaps his leg, and we get a
Peter
great
Weller
homage.
nails that line.
Peter Weller does in the animated movie. That's great, and so does Adam West in the Batman: Return of the Caped Crusaders animated movie.
Oh yeah,
there's a part in that movie where Adam West Batman goes dark, and it's during the pow biff wham scene when he gets to say that line. This isn't a muddle, it's an operating table, and I'm the surgeon. It starts breaking bones. It is glorious.
He also says you want to get nuts too. Like I think he has a few different like Batman quotes in there.
That Adam West would never say.
So the last thing I want to bring up from the mutant stuff, and then if you guys don't have anything else to say about the first 3, we'll move into the Superman stuff, which is what really cements this book for me. It's just that final issue is so fucking good.
It's so good.
We get probably it's funny you're talking about how like we really hit home that the mutants are like nasty, not goofy thugs. But then we get probably what is the goofiest fucking thing in this whole book with them. You know what I'm about to bring up, right?
We're talking about Bruno.
We don't talk about Bruno.
That's the beginning of the third one. Bruno.
Yeah, it's right. Is it the beginning of the third one? Yeah. fucking
Yeah, the
Nazi boobs over here.
Nazi boobs, and
no,
then Batman
no.
in disguise as an old lady.
YouTube's gonna shut us down.
Oh yeah,
Don't show that.
we're gonna get
Yeah,
demonetized
shit.
for the swastika boobs.
Okay, so
They're
please,
on her butt
please,
too.
please
That's right.
explain this to me. How probably the biggest Batman, in terms of just like physique. I can't even hide that well. Disguises himself as a little old lady.
Well, he's like a
He
big old
hunches over.
lady.
He hunches
Yeah,
over.
but he's like half his normal height. But no, I love that. And then I love when you get the no, not him, not yet, and we get not a look at Superman, but a voiceover or a text over, I guess, in a comic.
Mhm.
They build the Superman beautifully in this.
There's a great sequence that works in the comic because you get the citizen's point of view, and it's really like mythic and epic. And it's a scene that I don't think works in the movie, where this guy is almost killed getting run over by a train, and instead of Superman just picking him up, no, what does Superman do? He smashes the whole freaking train
Yeah.
and possibly kills people to do that. It works in the comic, but in the movie, it's such a brief moment. You're like, why'd he do that? Why didn't you just grab the guy? Why'd you do that, Superman?
Because
But yeah, that's a great sequence.
Superman's also kind of a dick in this story.
Yeah.
No,
So we'll get into that because I think that bears a lot of talking. But I just want to say before that, if I can find it, Superman's actual yes, beautiful,
No, yeah.
perfect way to introduce this Superman.
look at that Boy Scout.
He looks like such a douchebag.
I think the movie takes it further. I think the eagle like goes on his arm.
Yeah, it
or
does.
The falcon, whatever.
Yeah.
It
It's so
does.
silly. Though there's a great visual though where it picks up where in the comic where it picks up a rat and it's just like symbolism. It's great.
Yeah.
It's foreshadowing their fight. Like it's great stuff. But yeah, a couple points we didn't get to earlier that I want to get through real quick. One thing we didn't talk about with the Harvey Dent stuff that I don't know if this is an homage or a coincidence, but there's a scene where Batman and Gordon are talking about Harvey, and Batman says, this just stood out to me on this most recent reread of it, where Batman says, I believe in Harvey Dent.
Oh
which
yeah.
is a really big thing in Long
In the
Halloween.
Dark Knight. And
Long Halloween and
Yeah.
Dark Knight, where in Dark Knight they rework it as like Harvey Dent's campaign slogan, which obviously was looking at Long Halloween a lot. So I think that starts here, or in Long Halloween it's a coincidence. Again, I'm not sure, but that was just something that stood out to me. Like,
Another thing that's another thing that Jeff Loeb ripped off
Probably
from the
ripped-
story.
and I like Long Halloween, but Jeff Loeb borrows.
Well, and
a lot.
it's funny because it now makes me wonder if Nolan was looking at this for Dark Knight. We know he was looking at it for Rises because he just straight up rips the cop scene from the beginning off, but like it's not as good.
Yeah, it still works okay.
Yeah, that
But
really
this is better.
sucks.
We'll get to
Wow.
What was the other thing that you wanted to mention?
Well, talking about Batman's violence, there is that sequence with when him fighting some of the mutant gangs when they kidnap the child. It's funny how when like the animated movie was coming out, I don't know if you guys remember this. There are some shots in the trailer I remember for the second part of the animated movie that are kind of misleading out of context. Like there's one shot of Batman on a horse holding the gun, and out of context, like you're like, oh, I guess he uses guns in this, but in the comic, it's because he breaks it and says, no, we don't use guns. But there's another shot in that trailer during the Joker fight where he has to escape the cops, and he puts this plastic on the wall, and he has a gun, so he shoots it, and he's like, oh, this thing sucks. I remember that trailer. There was like this fierce debate I had with someone in a comment section. Clearly, never read the comic. It was like, Batman would never use guns. This is so not Batman. What the hell is this? And it's like, okay, you've clearly never read this comic. And there's a few instances in this comic where it's like Batman's not averse to using guns, like in a strategic way, like when it's absolutely necessary. It's just a really interesting choice. And of course, he has the rifle with the grappling hook. It's like he's not averse to using it in certain circumstances, but he doesn't like it. It's not. He still doesn't carry a gun on his belt the whole time.
It's
But
interesting because a lot of different Batman I've seen, it's that he doesn't use guns because he's traumatized by the sight of a
yeah,
gun, obviously, because of his parents. But in this, it's more he's sees himself as above using guns. Like,
right.
these are the weapons of cowards. We use
Yeah.
more precise tools.
Yeah, Batman
Um,
Begins leans
Like
into the
batarangs
trauma
through the
and
eyes.
yeah.
yeah,
Well, Batman Begins leans into the trauma element and does that well. But
yeah,
here, there's just some great stuff about like, oh, guns, like they make killing easy. You know, like people don't have to confront their violence, or like it doesn't take that. So, like, this is a very brutal. This is a Batman who likes to get his hands dirty. He's all about
yeah,
like
definitely.
intimate violence, but the gun stuff he doesn't like. Though there is that one sequence when he has to rescue the child, and the guy says, don't tempt me, like I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna waste him, and Batman
I
grabs the
believe
other
you.
guy, which is in BVS, where
Yeah.
he takes the gun. Shit. This scene is the one scene where I can't fully tell what just happened because
Yeah, because
it
I've seen a
looks
lot
like
of people blast Snyder for not understanding that scene. I don't understand that scene. Did he fire the gun? Because it looks like he did.
he
It
definitely fired
does.
it.
Yeah.
I
It
have looked at that shot so many times, and I can't tell what's going on. My only guess is he shot him in the shoulder or something,
or like his
because
foot.
at
Or,
at that point in the comic, you're not fully sure if this is Batman who kills or not. Like, it's
yeah.
not clear because he's very brutal and very violent. But when you get to the Joker stuff, is where he says, like, no, I don't kill. That was a vow I made 30 years ago or whatever. And everyone's saying, like, no, Batman doesn't kill, which is why when Joker dies, like, that's a big deal that Batman almost got there. And Joker ends up
Yeah.
killing himself. But so the comic is telling you in the following issue, like, no, Batman doesn't kill and he's never killed anyone. So then you circle back to that scene with the mutant person. I'm like, so I guess he lived, but like I don't know
Oh
what
my
happened
god.
in that
Okay.
scene.
So this isn't me criticizing it, but this makes me laugh. Her expression there in that first panel, like they didn't draw her mouth right.
yeah.
So
It's very stylish.
so do you guys have anything else you want to discuss for the first three before we get into the Superman issue?
Well, actually, my one last thought about the Joker is we were talking about how influential the story was, and I feel like this is also one of the first things that depicts Joker as having like kind of a romantic fascination with Batman.
Yeah.
Because he calls him darling, and he's there's like some other examples of him being you know kind of sexually attracted to Batman in a way, or at least just kind of provoking him in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
this is also a Joker that uses lipstick. Like his lips
mhm.
aren't just personal. Like I think that starts here. Like that's a choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a very 80s androgynous Joker.
Yeah, which we
Mhm.
get a lot more after this in like Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum
And
and
Asylum,
other
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And yeah, like so my final point with that was just that, and again, we'll talk about more about BVS another time, but that's like the big one where it's like Snyder's a fan of this, but he doesn't get it because he was citing that scene as an example. Like, well, Batman kills people in that book. He killed that mutant guy in that scene, even though the rest of the book is telling you that Batman
It's
doesn't
telling
kill
you he
people.
does not
And,
kill.
and
Yeah.
all throughout that freaking movie, Batman is just mowing people down and blowing people up. It's like, how much of that book did you read or pay attention to?
Yeah.
So there's things I like about that movie, but that stuff's frustrating.
Let's
Where
talk
it's
about
just,
the best issue.
So
yeah,
the first thing I want to bring up, because I saw this sentiment a lot, especially around the time that BBS came out, was that this book doesn't understand Superman. I'm gonna take a hard stance here, and you guys are free to disagree with me. If you believe that, you didn't read this.
sure. This book
Um,
has a very specific take on Superman
yes.
that I don't think is a huge leap from what he had been before this in the comics. It's not my favorite Superman, it's not my ideal Superman, but it fits in the
So
context of that story.
Well, it's kind of the same thing I have with Batman, where it's a very specific take on that character, but it's not exactly like how I see the character. But in within the interpretation of each character, there are qualities that I do see Like,
So
I still think Batman has the ideology that he has in this book. I just think he goes a little bit too far with it.
so
And
the main
Superman, I like how he's characterized in this, but he's also Reagan's lapdog, which is like, yeah, I don't know.
so and that's fair. But I just say I saw it's kind of died down a little bit now. But for a while there was a lot of discourse that this book doesn't understand Superman,
Yeah,
or Frank
I don't
Miller
agree
doesn't
with
like
that.
Superman. So
I don't agree. Yeah,
I want to point out this one specific panel, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it's this panel right here as he's diving into the water.
Mhm.
The text box says, and I read, "I gave them my obedience and my invisibility. They gave me a license and let us live. No, I don't like it, but I have to say I get to save lives, and the media stays quiet." He's not doing any of this willingly, which I feel like a lot of people don't catch. But he feels like it's his only chance to make a difference. And if that's not classic Superman, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, no,
This
I mean, I don't. Frank Miller could have made Superman like a caricature in this, but he does
He
feel
could
like
have made him what people think he is in this book.
yeah, just like a boring, basically what people who don't like Superman see Superman as, which is this boring OP figure.
But you add
But
that one little bit of dialogue, and I think that makes this so much more interesting.
yeah,
He is
exactly.
making what he thinks is the ultimate sacrifice to continue doing what he believes in.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of good Captain America stories that tackle this. And Captain America was a character everyone said, "Oh, he's boring. I don't like him," until we got movies that people liked. And now everyone's a fan of Captain America. So
Mhm.
it's like if you think Superman's boring or not, it's like you probably just haven't read like the right stuff or given him a chance.
To put it on video, guaranteeing you that will change when Superman Legacy comes out.
It might. I hope so.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully.
Everything looks good to me so far.
Yeah.
So this issue 4 is kind of the head of everything, and it's interesting with how standalone these issues feel. They also don't feel standalone. It feels like everything in the past 3 issues was needed to get both Batman and Superman into this place. And I really like, as much as I like them being friends, I like that Oliver says the world was never big enough for the both of you. And if there's anyone that you can pull that off with in a comic, it is Batman and Superman.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, that definitely starts here. And if the worst thing this comic probably did in terms of what we keep going back to in public perceptions is now eh, after this comic, everyone thinks like, oh, Batman and Superman hate each other. And it's like, well, no, what makes their dynamic in this interesting is that in the decades before this, they were friends who worked
Yeah.
together a lot. So I think in the context of the story, it works for me. I don't know if I actually agree with Oliver or buy into that, but I think the story makes it work. But it's,
I'm gonna
they
pull at
maybe
you. It worked for this version of Batman and Superman.
It does.
Because
yeah.
these
Right.
these are Batman and Supermans that do not flinch from their ideology.
They
Superman
don't
is very
compromise,
much like
yeah.
we are the guests here. He comes from it from a immigrant point of view, which Bruce has a monologue about, which Snyder takes part of it.
Mhm.
About how like your parents taught you to roll over. Mine didn't. Mine taught me that life only makes sense if you force it to. So Bruce is very much of no, they need us. They just don't know we need them. They need us. We should have never given this power up. Look what happened to the world. Where Clark is more of, no, like, it's their world. They don't want us. All we could do is be there when they are ready to have us or work with them on their terms. And with these two ideologies in this book specifically, in the setup that we have, it feels very classic Batman and Superman. I'll go to um, the Man of Steel book from around this time. I don't know if you guys have read that, but there's a issue with Batman. Slight spoilers for that, for a 40-year-old comic, but anyway,
It's fine.
where Superman meets Batman, and he wants to take him in for being a vigilante, and Batman is like, no, if you try to take me in, I have bombs set up that will kill an innocent person. And Superman is like, what? You're crazy. And so they team up and they stop a criminal. And then Batman reveals that the innocent that would have killed is himself.
No, that's great.
It's great. And that same kind of dynamic.
And I mean, kind of going off what Robert was saying earlier, like this does paint the or at least it's indirectly responsible for the idea that Batman and Superman hate each other. And in this story, I wouldn't even say that Clark hates Bruce. Maybe Bruce hates Clark, but I don't. I think he doesn't want to be fighting Batman in this book.
Absolutely.
No, he clearly doesn't, because they have that meeting.
He holds back.
Yeah.
Well, he holds back, but even then, before that, he tries to talk Bruce down multiple times. Yeah. And I don't think Bruce so much hates Clark in this, but this is a very bitter Bruce about how things went down. And I feel like that bitterness kind of harnesses and it sharpens itself towards Clark. And he kind of views Clark as the person responsible for the state of the world.
Right. And I think my read on it has always been that this bitterness is built over the last 20 years. This is how he has always felt about Superman. I get what you're saying earlier, where it's like their conflict comes from them being so stubborn and ideologically opposed. Like that's what reaches that breaking point and them getting pitted against each other. But I've never read this story as, oh, these two people hate each other. They are just set in their ways and outside circumstances forcing them kind of blows.
I don't think even the story says they hate each other, because even all Oliver says is that this planet was never big enough for the two of them. That doesn't mean that they have to hate each other. It just means at some point they were always going to come into conflict because of their ideologies.
And it just feels like after this comic, like all we ever do with Batman and Superman is, oh, these two hate each other, and which isn't actually true. But we do that a lot.
But to be fair, most of that is first meetings. And I fully buy that Batman would not like Superman on a first meeting, and that Superman would be distrustful of a vigilante.
I think it depends on the story. And like I said, this is also at a time where in the decades prior to this, it's like, no, they were buddies. They teamed up all the time during the Silver Age.
Part of the problem is this is the dream match, right? Like the comic book nerd dream match is Batman and Superman, because completely on accident, this is what I find fascinating. Completely on accident, DC's top two heroes are polar, like down to the molecule opposites. Like you can't plan that.
Yeah. I think ultimately they fight for a similar cause, but they go about it in very different ways.
Well, that's what works is I don't think either of them are wrong, but at the same time they're both wrong.
Right.
They're both extremes. And like I said, I see this as a very morally gray Batman. Like I want to call the ending ambiguous, but it kind of just depends on the reader how much you see that as a happy ending. Like it's the right ending for that character and for the story, but there's definitely dark implications there. Like that's why you get the debates all throughout the whole comic is just these extremes yelling at each other, not getting along. You get that.
That's something I wanted to bring up with the news segments in this story.
Yes. So I'm going to rewind because Robert, you will find this funny. So one of the talking heads in this is Lotta Lang.
I love that.
My only exposure to Lotta Lang before this was Smallville. I was very confused about this Lotta Lang.
Well, yeah, don't they say what is she, like the editor at the Daily Planet or something? I don't remember
something like that.
Which, I mean, it is weird that you would do Lana and not Lois. Like Lois, I don't think is even mentioned. We don't even touch that relationship.
I don't think Miller ever does, because even so I know I jokingly said good thing we never made a sequel to this, but even in the sequels, like he's just with Diana.
Yep.
And then they have a kid.
I don't know if this is true. DC was really weird about maintaining the status quo of Superman and Lois like for decades. Like, no, she can't know that Clark is Superman, and it's the constant will they, won't they. So, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but, like, he might not even been allowed to use Lois for the story. Where it's like, we can't even touch that.
Maybe, because I feel like even in the Man of Steel, like, because I own all those now, Just judging on some of the covers, it looks like that also does something with Wonder Woman and Clark.
Yeah, they might hint at it. That I'm not sure.
Well, I know in the Wonder Woman book, like she straight out has a crush on him.
Okay, I still need to read that stuff. That's a big Wonder Woman's a big blind spot for me. Like I've read a couple stories, but I need to read that Hades stuff. Like the thing, not to get too long on a tangent, but what a lot of like the modern classic DC stuff definitely comes after Crisis with like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. And Superman and
Real
Wonder Woman
quick,
are like
sorry.
rebooted. Okay.
Real quick. Yes, Lana Lang is the managing editor of the Daily Planet.
Yeah, which is an interesting choice.
But anyway.
Yeah, it's so like Superman and Wonder Woman get rebooted like from the ground up, which works in the context of those books, but God, like we'll talk about this more in other videos, but DC's continuity was such a freaking mess after Crisis. Like they did not plan that stuff out well. Like Wonder Woman, it's like, oh, she can't be a founding member of the Justice League anymore. Black Canary, why? I don't know, because we need a girl on the team. There's so much weird stuff, and now DC has had like 5 reboots since then. So we got some great comics,
Yep.
but I don't know if it was all worth it. Is all I'm saying.
They're always rebooting.
I'm of two minds on this because I think works as a complete piece. But man, you know, there's sometimes reading it where I want like one shots or something for some of the other league.
Yeah.
I want to know about them.
Yeah, you get like one mention of Hal Jordan, like he's in space somewhere. Diana's back on Themyscira. Like that is seeded here. Like, okay, Frank Miller, like just the fact that Diana's even mentioned, and then she's a big part of Dark Knight Strikes Again and All-Star Batman and Robin. So yeah, he has a weird thing for Wonder Woman, and he has a very weird take on that character. But it makes me wish, like, even if I liked it or not, like, yeah, I do wish we had like just gotten a Wonder Woman story in this universe and not the weird like supporting stuff with her and the other books. Like, but just a Wonder Woman one shot, like in this universe, like that could have been cool.
Okay, so we're at an hour 40 already. I don't know how. I don't know what this will look like after I trim it down because I'll probably trim out some of our tangents.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, this is a dense series. There's a lot to talk
That's
about
true.
in this book. Yeah.
There's so much going on in every frame. Also, the Batman on the horse. We need like more Batman riding a horse.
Love it.
It's always cool.
It almost happened in '89.
Yep.
Snyder, you should have put that in BVS.
Yeah.
The final fight is great. I like how simple and short it is. And I'm going to say that I think Batman is the definitive winner in that fight because he outthinks Superman.
Sure.
Do you know how hard that must be?
No, it's a very well-written, structured fight. And growing up, those thought exercises of like those debates that kids have of who would win a fight, this character, that never interested me. Because I'm always just like, well, whoever wins, like, it just depends on the writer. It depends on the story. Like, obviously, Superman could and should beat Batman in seconds. It's in the context of the story why Batman wins and why you believe it. Mm-hmm. You know, but it's not. That's different than just a hypothetical fight where it's like I just put them in an arena and watch them punch each other. It's like you need the build up to it. You need the story around it to make that fight work. And there was
a couple of years when I was like in elementary school where I'd get in those debates, but at this point I am too old for that. It's
I don't.
The answer is whoever the writers want to win. I think personally for a Batman Superman fight, this is the most logical conclusion. Neither one would win, but Batman would be the winner in terms of outthinking and outmaneuvering his opponent.
Right.
Superman gets his ass kicked in this book. But no, Batman fakes his death. And the other little detail with Superman is that he's not a buffoon. He catches on to Bruce at the end, but he doesn't say anything. And I feel like that's another detail that nobody brings up when they complain about Superman in this book.
Yeah, no, I mean, Superman, he's a well-written character, just like a lot of the other characters in this book. Like
I said before, about their Oliver Queen?
He's great. I like him a lot.
He's pretty good.
I like that that's another one I want a one shot for. I want to know exactly what happened to his arm.
I don't now. It's like I want that one shot in the late 80s or early 90s. I don't want that one
I
shot.
don't want it now because somebody else would have to write it because Frank Miller has lost his mind.
That is true.
Yeah.
The big thing we haven't talked about the fight though that I love, and there's a great visual callback to it that took me way too many rereadings to catch up on, is the fact that we know plot wise that Bruce
Great
sets
art.
the fight in. That's so iconic. It's a great panel.
Mhm.
Like we know before the fight that Bruce says we're taking this to Crime Alley because that's where I want to die. Where we're doing the fight in Crime Alley, but like you get the lamppost, which is the same lamppost from the beginning of the book when Bruce is walking through the streets and he's in Crime Alley. So it's just this great visual callback, like just bringing it full circle. Like this like tells you exactly where Crime Alley is, which is the thing people have made fun of and joked about. Like, oh, of course it's called Crime Alley. That's so dumb. It's like, no, it's named Crime Alley retroactively because that's where the Waynes were murdered. It's just this notorious place where all this stuff has happened. It's like it's a thing that people call it over time. It wasn't just called Crime Alley when the Waynes were walking through there. That should be clear. But yeah, I really love what they do with the Crime Alley setting and how we take the fight back there, and like how like visually you can see like, oh, this is the same spot. Like we're always at that lamppost, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like you said, it brings it full circle.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I want to mention though before we end it is that aside from the Superman fight, I like a lot of the stuff that happens before that with like focusing on just kind of random people at the beginning, and when the nuke goes off and like everyone starts to lose their minds.
Everybody loses their minds.
Everybody loses their minds. Yeah. I think a lot of the character stuff is really well done. And then seeing like Batman and the sons of Batman come in and just like, no, you're going to work to put out these fires.
You mean when Batman becomes Judge Dredd?
Yeah, he's the law.
Yeah, basically.
I am the law.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great scene. It's one of my favorite scenes of the book.
It really feels like we should have gotten all these awesome like Batman, Judge Dredd, RoboCop. Like that could all just be in the same universe with this, and we should have got more stuff, and we didn't. Like
we got two of them just in this book. We got Batman and Judge Dredd. He is the law. I love how Peter Weller delivers that speech. By the way,
yeah,
I am the law.
Yeah. He has a few stiff line readings of that, but for the most part, he's really great. There's just a few moments where it's like, oh, right, you're not like a professional voice actor, and that maybe could have done another take. But for most of that movie, I think he's fantastic. That was a really inspiring choice.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna move this into our final thoughts, just because we are almost at 2 hours of recording. I don't know what it'll be after we trim it out, but I don't want this to be like a 3-hour video. So we're not going to do so on our sister channel, Haven of Horror, we do out of 5. I don't think we're going to do that with this channel just to keep it different. Maybe just do like, do you recommend it or not? What do you guys think?
I give it 5 batarangs. No.
In eyes.
In eyes.
Hey, we could do that. Just change up our rating depending on what we're watching or reading.
I'm fine with either.
And you know what? Let's just stick to the 5. It's simple. It's easy to remember, and we do it that way. We don't get mixed up between channels.
Okay.
So, Robert, final thoughts, and what would you rate this out of 5 if you had to rate it?
It's great if you've never read a comic book, or you think comic books are for children or aren't art. This is one of the first ones you should read. I don't know if this is the first Batman comic someone should read getting into Batman.
It's a really wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on a lot of the classic stuff. But
no, I know people hate it, but I still say Hutch is the best way to introduce somebody to Batman.
Yeah.
You get to sample every villain. You get a good Batman characterization for the most part, from what I remember. And it has some of the best art in any Batman book, in my opinion.
The art's amazing. I do prefer Long Halloween, and I also think that uses the Rogues Gallery very well. You get a lot of them throughout that story. The main issue with Long Halloween, just as an introductory book, is it is very long, and as we'll discuss in other videos, there are flaws
Just
with
like
it.
the title.
But yeah. I mean, I like Hush,
Yeah,
but
it's
I do
not the
prefer Long
short
Halloween.
Halloween,
The medium-sized Halloween.
the extra long Halloween. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so but like I said, this is very good. Like I'll just give it a 5. I'm not gonna be get have a hot take here. It's like I feel like I should go lower just because it's like not one of my favorite things of all time, and I can't call it my favorite Batman comic. But I'm also struggling to come up with criticisms. Like my only issue
Yeah.
really is just some of the political stuff. I wanted to talk about it earlier. We just didn't really have time, but I'll go ahead and throw this out real quick. Do you guys think this should have gone harder in the Watchmen direction of like explicitly being set in the 80s and having more references, or do you think it has a good balance? Because I think they could, like Reagan being president is something I find a little distracting, and it could have just been more of just a stand-in, or it's like if you get it, you get it. Because like David Letterman, it doesn't literally appear. It's just a parody of David.
He's a
You know,
Letterman-esque character.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think they should have gone further one direction or the other, but like that's my only real gripe. Like, do you guys think it has a fine balance?
I think I'm fine with it for the most part. I think I can see someone reading this and being like, "Why is Reagan here?"
Yeah,
But I don't know. I also think it's fine, and I mean like, it was fine satire for the time. So
sure.
yeah,
It's
Um,
also just interesting politically because Frank Miller is so all over the map. You can't put him in a box,
yeah.
which is
Even
definitely
just
here. And boy, does he go off the rails later. But that's one
even
thing that's interesting.
even just reading this, it's kind of hard to pin down
Exactly.
politics.
Yeah. So what are you
I
saying,
think
John?
it plays a good balance. It reminds me of Batman the Animated Series, where there's certain things where you're like, that's very 90s, but then you get something else that's like very 50s. And I don't think it tries to hide that it's the 80s, because there is a lot that is very 80s, but
Mm,
it's timeless in the way RoboCop is, because RoboCop is also very
sure.
80s.
Hmm.
I don't know what it says about the world that I find RoboCop timeless. Um,
Yeah, it is.
but I find RoboCop timeless in the same way that this is timeless, where the themes and the satire are still relevant today,
Yep.
which is what makes this timeless. Even if you have stuff like Reagan, I can overlook that because he's never called Reagan that I saw.
Sure.
So unless I'm thinking about it, I can just picture, oh, this is just a president based off the president at the time. It's not like, the Ultimates that had Obama
Mm,
or Bush directly referenced.
mm.
So I think this strikes a good balance.
And the Cold War's a really big part of this story, but it had been for decades. And I mean, we didn't know when this came out how long the Cold War was going to keep going. Like, we didn't know that was going to be done like by the end of the 80s, early 90s. Like, that was just what had been going on for decades. So it's hard to call that, like, say if that's dated or not. But like you guys said, it's just satire of the time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you probably have to go into this book with some historical perspective and just realize that it was written for a certain time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Torgo,
Um,
final thoughts, and what is your scores? Sorry, I keep
so
forgetting my
final
camera's over here.
final thoughts. Just want to say that while I don't, this is not my favorite Batman story. Like I've said before, it's not my definitive version of the Batman. Doesn't mean I dislike the book at all. I think it's a fantastic book. I think it's very well written. A lot of the political satire is great. The art is beautiful. Um,
Hmm.
it's as a character study for Batman and Superman. It's and how they oppose each other. It's very thought provoking. It's very fascinating. Just yeah, overall, just as an experience, it's a classic comic for a reason, and it's a very mature comic. I do agree that if this is like one of the go-to books besides Watchmen, like to point someone in the right direction, like if you don't respect comics at all as a medium, you should read this. Not a great introduction to Batman, but still like a great piece of art on its own. So I would give it 4.5 bat shark repellents.
This, I feel like without this book, we wouldn't have the Batman that I came to love. Obviously, there's others surrounding it, but this is the one I feel like a lot of people are trying to emulate. Um, I have issues with it. I have questions, but it's not enough to ruin the book. Overall, I have to give this a 5. This is it. I don't ever see this falling out of my top 5, even if someday I do find a Batman story that I like better than this. It is, in my opinion, quintessential Batman. Maybe not the starting. Like I said, maybe Hush, just so that they can get a sample of the Batman world. But for a first reader, I think maybe year 1 would be a better starting place, or year 0.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I would say this should be one of your first, not your first, but one of the first books that you read.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that we should talk about before we close out this video?
I think we covered everything.
Will we be back in 2 weeks with Batman Ego? Is that the plan?
That is the plan as of right now,
Right.
for sure. Well, thank you everyone who made it to the end of this video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you like the video. It helps a lot. Torgo, Robert, as always, it was a pleasure.